it was interesting to note that while both the Urban Development Minister and the Prime Minister spoke this morning shortly, neither of them mentioned any details of how these homes are going to be constructed, what process they're going to follow for the Smart City project. We just have reports that have come in some time ago on what kind of money is going to be spent, but I'm told that we have Niranjan Hiranandani who joins us right now from Powai. Niranjan, thank you for joining us. Good afternoon. If you tuned in and you heard the Prime Minister speak, there were, as always, it was a very heartening speech, but there weren't enough details there of how these homes are going to be constructed. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Sujay from Kolte Patil. Is an interest rate subvention enough motivation for someone like you to start looking at low-cost housing within that 10 lakh rupee bracket?
You have to understand one thing, that we will certainly like to look at the low-cost housing in a very big way. The total economics can only be studied when we get into the totality of what taxation is. Today, 31% of an affordable house is taxes. So it won't just be an interest subvention that will become important. Let's say, for instance, service tax. Service tax of 14% is levied on a house which is under construction. But if there is an occupation certificate, this tax is not levied. The effective rate of tax becomes 5%. But for a poor man who buys a house on installment has to pay a service tax. A rich man who can afford a ready-made house doesn't pay service tax. What kind of inequity is this? So it won't be interest subvention which will be sufficient. They'll need to remove the other inequities in terms of various taxes, including service tax. So if you combine a movement of this led by the Prime Minister, I think the interest of Hiranandani will be very high.
Well, Niranjan, there was also a lot of talk about smart cities, about the Amrit Urban Renewal Mission, and you'd also possibly be happy to know that the Prime Minister noted that even if someone builds a beautiful home, if there isn't road, if there isn't water, if there isn't electricity, there isn't quite any point to it. So do you think that this sort of a push, if this is actually going to be achieved, if that 50,000 crore rupees is going to be spent over the next 5 years, what's the best way for the government to go ahead and do that?
I think it's wonderful because there will be a focused growth. You can't spend 60,000 crores on the whole country and expect things to happen. So I think what the Prime Minister is doing is exactly what China did, which is choose a part of the country where urban infrastructure, roads, transportations, trains, metros, and those are focused upon in certain areas of China, and then expect that the development will be done by private enterprise also, and also by FDI. So I think he's trying to use the Chinese model, which is to create urban infrastructure in certain selected areas. And number two, remember, the GDP growth in this country which has taken place in the last 30 years is all focused where congestion is there. Industrial congestion, new towns and cities. So almost 80% of the GDP is now focused around cities and industrial cities of India. So what I think he's hoping that there will be a kickstart of GDP growth in a much more greater way and may exceed 10% in the next 3 years.
Bring in Mrityunjay Singh, Executive Director and CEO of Persistent Systems, who joins us from Pune. Mrityunjay, there was again a lot of talk there about e-governance, the fact that even after these smart cities are constructed, there's going to be a lot of IT support that will be needed to support the running, to support maintenance, to support services that will be offered. What sort of opportunities do you think exist for the IT industry in this larger plan?
No, this is a fantastic initiative. If you look at the growth of these cities have been growing at 20-30%, and maybe some have been growing much faster. Now, when you have such a high growth, you need a systemic support, and that systemic support can be provided only by technology. And there is a cost of not having technology today. So if you look at real estate, for example, if you introduce technology, it can take away anything between 200 to 400 rupees per square feet from the cost base itself. Now, overall, the citizen services, whether it's ambulance, whether it's security, whether it's any other services that the people deserve, they need all of these as a connected ecosystem, because it's all isolated. There are multiple agencies involved. So the opportunity is to actually create a platform which can bring all of this together and deliver these services in an integrated manner. Today what happens is you may have electricity and you may not have water, and you may have water, you may not have security, you may have road, you may not have something else, which doesn't help, because as a citizen I want access to all of it. So the idea is to bring a platform that could be a real game changer for India. If we can bring all of this together on a platform and enable all this in an integrated fashion, that could be completely change the face of the cities.
I also want to talk about the kind of construction that we might see if we look at a blue sky scenario where this plan actually plays out the way the government hopes that it will. What sort of fillip are we seeing? Ramesh, I'll come to you with this. What sort of fillip do we expect to see for the infrastructure sector, for the construction sector, for cement companies in terms of just the kind of demand we will see for construction over the next 5 years?
To build 2 crore homes over the next 7 years, close to 250 industries which are associated with real estate. All these industries will get benefited if they cater to the affordable housing segment. I think Niranjan Bhai summarized it very well. What the industry needs today is faster approval, single window clearances. Industry needs more land. Unless the land is less than 1 crore an acre, that brings to the third point, which is providing infrastructure to reach these lands. So those far-flung areas, having those trains, those suburban roads to reach these locations, cutting those taxes. Niranjan Bhai mentioned again, 30% is of your homes is actually the cost is taxes. If you can cut that, if you can reintroduce the 80IB scheme for developers to help them incentivize, do this, have a similar 80IB scheme for housing finance companies, if they could do it, make FDI and ECB a lot more easier to access again for affordable housing. I think the government needs to do all these aspects before it becomes a reality. Let me summarize with something what Arun Shauri recently said. When everything is said and done, I think today it's been said, we need to see what the government is going to do.
All right. We should also at this point take a look at the infrastructure stocks there. If we pull up BHEL, if we look at NBCC, SmartLink, these stocks are moving up after that announcement. Sujay, tell me simply this, as a real estate developer at this point, other than the fact that we have heard enough about smart cities, we've heard enough right now about the fact that the government is looking at all of these things quite strongly. From a developer's point, in terms of the regulator, and the Prime Minister did say that he's worried about the smaller investor, the smaller home buyer, sort of being bullied by the real estate developer. How soon should we ideally see a real estate regulator come in?
We are, the clear indications that it will get passed during this monsoon session. Then the states have to adopt, certain percentage of the states have to adopt that bill for it to become the law. And we feel that in Maharashtra, it will be as soon as this year, before this financial year ends, we should see a regulator in Maharashtra as well, on the lines of what the central bill will ultimately propose.
And Niranjan, also for the cash-strapped real estate sector at this point, given this kind of push, do you think in any way raising finances for projects might become simpler, might become slightly easier given the push from the government?
Because once the direction is given by the highest authority of the country, and of course a support by the Reserve Bank of India, I think this difference is going to happen. A large number of developers at the present are of course over leveraged, and that is a cause of concern, because they really have to be able to get into the market to do selling. But once we are able to rationalize all these taxes and be able to get the projects online and on stream early, I think a difference will happen to these companies also. But a large amount of land bank is actually waiting for the kind of policy change that needs it to happen, a single window clearance to give approvals. It's horrendous delays are there today, and something which you can't imagine is happening on the ground in terms of delays. So if we can correct that along with the policy changes which we are talking about, I think we'll see a paradigm in real estate for affordable housing, and smart cities will really see the light of day very quickly.
All right, we are running out of time, but I want each of our guests on the show today to list out the things that they think are critical in order to make these plans work. Nitinjay, I want to start with you from a tech point of view, in India right now being the hotbed sort of for innovation and for frugal innovation in the tech space. What is top of mind for you to make these plans, actually pan out successfully?
If you ask me, the first priority would be, as I said, to create a platform where we can bring all these services together. The second thing should be digitization, because that will take away a lot of discretionary power that people have. And the third thing would be security. I think that's extremely important for citizens in all of the urban areas. We probably need a connected grid, and we should have a policy to have every establishment run a secure camera that should be connected to a grid. If we can do these three things, I think that will be a game changer for the country.
Ramesh, top of mind for you?
My top three would be having ATIB kind of a scheme for developers to incentivize them to do affordable housing. Second is huge infrastructure push on building highways to suburban peripheral areas so that land at lower costs can be monetized. And third would be single window clearance along with cutting of those 30% taxes to make affordable housing cheaper.
But today we talked a lot about all of the things that we need, and we know that there's been a lot of debate as well with land acquisition. How important is it from your point of view, and how much of a a role will it play if they manage to bring through that land acquisition act?
We have not. I personally feel it's of no impact actually as far as affordable housing goes, because even if it's not that today, if some private developer wants to do affordable housing, he can't buy land. He can definitely buy land, but the three top of the mind things that have to improve if this has to turn into reality is approvals. Everything else will fall into place. There are enough private participation on the funding side, development side. What is ailing this entire dream from becoming reality is just the time and cost one has to spend on getting those 50-60 approvals that we have to get.
Niranjan, are we all finally circling back to the same thing? It's about the approvals, it's about speeding up the process?
Yeah, I think number one is approvals, number two is infrastructure, number three is taxes, not necessarily in the same order. I think they are all of equal importance, but the approval process is still horrendous. I think we need to improve it.
All right, all of our guests are agreeing that approval process is top of mind, and that's the thing that the government is going to have to focus on in order to make smart cities, in order to make a home for every Indian, those 2 crore rupee homes possible. And of course, for that Amrit scheme to be possible, we're going to have to iron out the approval process and iron out all of the time and the energy and the money that it costs to get those approvals. In fact, some time ago, the Urban Development Minister had spoken as well, and he talked about the fact that these are the things that they will in fact iron out. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us on the show. Ramesh, Sujay, thank you for coming in. Niranjan and Mrityunjay on the other end, thank you so much. What we're going to do is we'll leave you with this quick conversation with the Urban Development Minister, Venkaiah Naidu. He spoke to ET Now a little earlier. In an exclusive chat, he said the 100 smart cities will be selected by the Urban Development Ministry and will have to be smart in terms of tax collection.